10 Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific. Thanks so much for joining us on this Friday, a busy Friday. I'm Ana Cabrera reporting from New York. Let's get right to the breaking news from Washington, where next hour we expect to hear from President Trump and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth at the White House. It's unclear at this point what those remarks are about. Meanwhile, Elon Musk will be making a visit to Hegseth's home turf. The richest man in the world expected to receive an unclassified briefing at the Pentagon today that will include a discussion on China, according to two defense officials. While the New York Times is reporting, citing two U.S. officials, that Musk would even be briefed on the U.S. military's plans for potential war with China, which the president is disputing on social media this morning. Joining us now from the White House is Aaron Gilchrist. First, Aaron, what do we know about the president's upcoming remarks with his defense secretary?
Yeah, those remarks set for 11 a.m. today, Anna, and the White House has been pretty tight-lipped about what exactly it is we should expect to hear from President Trump and Defense Secretary Hegseth during these remarks that we understand we're going to be able to watch as they're happening. We do know that the Secretary of Defense overnight did post on social media that there would be a big announcement today. The Pentagon has been very present in the social media space, oftentimes talking about some of the work that Doge has been doing with the Pentagon. The Secretary of Defense announcing just yesterday that he's cutting $580 million in defense programs, contracts, and grants through some of the work that Doge has been able to do with his agency in terms of finding places for more efficiency and getting rid of waste. And so there's potential that that could be part of the topic we hear today, although it is fairly unusual, Anna, to see a president and a defense secretary offer remarks inside the Oval Office unless it's something pretty significant. And again, the defense secretary posting on his social media that it is a big announcement we should expect this morning.
And so then you have Musk going to the Pentagon. We just got video of his arrival there. This is an extraordinary step, it seems, that Elon Musk is giving this unprecedented access to the U.S. government. And now inside the halls of the Pentagon, what kind of information is Musk going to receive?
Yeah, our Pentagon team has been tracking this pretty closely. The video here just flagged to us by our Pentagon producer. Courtney Cubey, our Pentagon correspondent, has been able to learn from three defense officials that Musk was going to be having this meeting and that there was an expectation that part of this meeting would include an unclassified briefing that would likely contain information about China. The extent of what sort of information about China is something that is unclear at this point. There are other news organizations reporting that this would include military planning as it relates to China. President Trump and members of the Defense Department have been swatting that down aggressively, both on social media and on television this morning. We've seen real pushback to that idea. One official saying that Elon Musk was coming simply for a visit. The defense secretary, again, posting on social media that he was coming for a conversation about innovation, efficiencies, and smarter production from the Defense Department. And so, Anna, it's yet to be seen exactly what the conversation will be. But you can imagine if President Trump does take questions in the Oval Office, as he tends to do when he appears today, this will be on that list. And we could learn more from the president himself about what Elon Musk is doing at the Pentagon today.
And again, we can confirm he's at the Pentagon, as we see him in that video. Walking on in, Aaron Gilchrist, thanks so much. Keep us posted. We have more breaking news now regarding the Trump administration this morning. The Justice Department out just moments ago as we were coming on air with a new response to the judge who's demanding more information about the administration invoking the Alien Enemies Act. Remember, that was almost a week ago when it deported migrants to El Salvador. And this judge wants to know whether the administration ignored a court order when they did it. Here's also some of that video we've seen. There's a hearing scheduled in this case this afternoon, so we hope to get more information then. NBC News senior Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley has been on top of this story at every turn. Also with us is Joyce Vance, former U.S. attorney and MSNBC legal analyst. Julia, what's the DOJ saying in this new filing, and then what can we expect later today at that hearing?
That's right. So this is coming ahead of that hearing. You know, Judge Boasberg all week has been pushing the government for more answers. not about whether or not his decision should change. He still has that stay in place on the Alien Enemies Act, but whether or not they violated his Saturday night order by continuing to put those immigrants in that prison in El Salvador. Right now, what we're learning in this filing from the Justice Department is that they're claiming that there are cabinet-level discussions over invoking the State Secret Act, and instead saying that they can't answer all of Judge Boasberg's questions as to whether or not they violated the order and give him details like the timing of when the planes took off and when they landed and when they were in the air and exactly who was on them and when exactly this act was first invoked. Instead, they are having cabinet-level discussions to see if they're going to invoke the State Secrets Act, which is even a higher level than classification of documents, what would even possibly keep Judge Boasberg from getting these answers himself. He's already said he's willing to do this in camera, meaning behind closed doors in his chamber, and only to him. But at this point, they're saying that may even be too far.
The judge has been taking issue with the layers that seem to be preventing him from getting answers. Again, it's been almost a week here. He wrote just last night as he was really urging the government to come back with something more. He called what they had already given him woefully insufficient. And he wrote, the government cannot proffer a regional ICE official to attest to cabinet-level discussions of the state secret's privilege. Again, just moments ago, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche submitted this declaration, say he can attest to the accuracy of the statements based on personal knowledge. So, Joyce, how do you see this?
Well, this is so intricate procedurally because, as Julia says, this is not about the substance of the case. This is about whether the government violated the temporary restraining order that Judge Boasberg put in place. He's trying to get facts that will allow him to make that determination. And the government is stonewalling, which is a little bit difficult to understand since so much of this is clearly not a matter of state secrets. For instance, the fact that Trump invoked the Alien Act, or the fact that these planes took off and landed, which the government itself paraded around on social media. So although normally when state secrets are involved, courts don't inquire too deeply beyond the fact of the invocation, here it's entirely appropriate. And what this attestation from the Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche, does is it's minimal compliance with the court's order. Todd Blanche has simply said, I'm aware and I've been involved in these conversations at the cabinet level. Look, I think it's appropriate for the cabinet to take its time to determine whether or not to invoke state secrets, which is a common law doctrine that prevents courts from inquiring into military secrets that could damage our national security. On the other hand, the government is flirting with violating the judge's order, and he has plenty of possibilities for contempt proceedings against the government if he finally loses his patience with them.
So tell us more about that, because we've seen Judge Boasberg repeatedly ask for more information and not get it. Realistically, what more can he do or other judges do in a case like this?
Right. So I guess the most strident possibility here, Anna, would be to go after the government for some form of criminal contempt. And although we might normally say, well, that can't happen since the Justice Department is the prosecution, there's actually a provision in the federal rules of criminal procedure that lets the judge appoint a private prosecutor if the government isn't willing, which they almost certainly would not be willing in this situation. There's some precedent for that to happen. I've been involved in a matter in my district many years ago during the Bush administration where a judge actually did that and permitted a prosecution for contempt to move forward, in that case against a private party, not the government. But there's good indication from courts in the District of Columbia that you can take sanctions against the government, including jailing government officials or requiring them to pay damages personally if a contempt prosecution is successful.
Julia, there's still this big question about whether the people who were deported were even who the government says they were. They've been called gang members and terrorists. You've been talking to some of their families. What more have you learned?
That's right. We've been talking to families. We've had 3 and then others who we've spoken to since Tuesday who have said that, look, their people, their loved ones, some of them brothers, some of them sons, some of them husbands, are not members of this gang and have no criminal activity. And in fact, we saw that same field office ICE director that we heard from originally in this filing put out another attestation. He was attesting earlier in the week that many of these people don't have criminal histories. Yes, that's correct, but he said it's only because they haven't been in the country long enough to commit a crime. And Anna, what they're trying to say is that because these people have an affiliation with the Tren de Aragua gang, they believe they could commit a crime. But that affiliation, of course, we haven't seen that be proven in a court of law. Oftentimes they will use a tattoo to try to connect someone, but it's not the same way that you would typically do it. But that's what the Alien Enemies Act does. It allows a president to use sweeping wartime powers in order to summarily deport usually a nationality in a time of war. In this case, they're using it to go after this specific gang, regardless of how tight that affiliation really is.
Julia Ainsley and Joyce Vance, ladies, thank you so much for walking us through all of these steps. And joining us now is Skye Perryman, President and CEO of Democracy Forward and co-counsel in that joint lawsuit with the ACLU against the Trump administration in this Alien Enemies Act case. Skye, the deportations were Saturday. You and I last spoke Monday. Have you gotten any of the answers you're seeking?
You know, the government continues to believe that it's above the law and to operate in secrecy in this case. So we are continuing. We just got the filing that you referenced in the conversation earlier from the government, and we're continuing to obtain information. But what we haven't seen, of course, is anything, and this is, I think, what every American in this country should be concerned about. The invocation of the Alien Enemies Act is an attempt to summarily remove people from this country without any process at all. And so we have been submitting information from concerned family members who believe that people may have been removed from this country who were not actually members of gangs or had no basis for being removed, but have been removed from the country without any process at all. That is the real problem here. And then the doubly concerning problem, and something that should concern every American, is the way in which the government has been operating in this case, suggesting at times that there is a question as to whether it has to follow a district court order from a federal judge. And so we believe this is a highly concerning situation. We're working every day with a great team of attorneys to try to protect not just our clients in this case, but everyone in this country who this is a real threat for.
What do you make of the government's refusal to provide more specific answers over this question of state secrets?
You know, the judge is giving the government time to figure out what types of, if it wants to invoke this. But this is really not, it's not good faith the way they're operating. Today, there's a declaration that has come in, not from a cabinet level official, but from yet another official at the Justice Department. So we're just going to continue to wait and work with the court process. And we will be holding the government accountable to the law as is required in this case.
According to one account provided in court documents, one family member has said that their family member was detained, they believe, because of a tattoo and then vanished from immigration databases. Are you hearing similar stories?
Absolutely. And this is what we want to make sure the American people understand. There's a lot of highly politicized rhetoric coming out of the White House, but this is a president that has invoked an act that has only ever been invoked 3 times in the nation's history in declared wars, in the War of 1812, in World War I, and in World War II. And of course, in World War II, the government's use of this act, and of course, that was a declared war, but in World War II, the government's use of this act led to the internment and incarceration of Japanese Americans and of others for which presidents, Congress, and the courts have apologized. And it has been a stain on our national values and highly harmful to people. And so this is what this president is doing. We are not at war. We have not been invaded. And they are seeking to remove people from the country without any process. If they are confident that individuals need to be removed from the country, there are plenty of lawful ways to do that. And so every American should be suspicious and concerned about what is happening in this case.
Border crossings are at their lowest levels in decades. The president even posted on social media at one point that the invasion is, quote, over. So that's just another key piece of the puzzle, I think, as we're discussing this story and the Alien Enemies Act. There's some new reporting as well in the New York Times in invoking this Alien Enemies Act, that the administration believes that this order lets immigration agents enter homes without warrants. What additional issues does that raise?
Well, this is, again, you're seeing this for what it is. This is a concerning problem for every single American and for anyone that believes in our free society and the limits of governmental and presidential power. So this is why this case is so important. It's why we're in this case. And I did want to mention something, since you brought up the continued social media post from government officials, including the president. I mean, these people are trying to have a federal court believe that there is something that is so secretive that they can't even provide it to a federal judge, a federal judge in a confidential setting. But yet every day they're taking to social media and posting videos and posting things about the very things that they're saying are so secret. So there is a lot of hypocrisy going on, but there's also a lot of harm going on. And, we all need to think about, how would we feel if the government was doing this with our loved ones, with people in our neighborhood, with people in our families, with people in our communities.
Sky
And
Perryman.
that's a scary prospect. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us, and let's stay in touch. Thank you so much.
Great.
Up next, lights out. London's largest airport closed. The global travel chaos sparked by an electrical fire. Plus, President Trump's growing fight against the judiciary.
Jackie Robinson. Here's how a different spokesman is responding to the uproar over the website purges.
Every now and then, because of the realities of AI tools and other software, some important content was incorrectly pulled offline to be reviewed. We want to be very, very clear. History is not DEI. When content is either mistakenly removed or if it's maliciously removed, we continue to work quickly to restore it.
And new CNN reporting is that military units were instructed to simply use keyword searches like racism, ethnicity, history, and first when searching for articles and photos to remove. Other keywords included LGBTQ, historic, accessibility, opportunity, belonging. Since we're talking about the Pentagon, I should note that Elon Musk arrived there just a short time ago. He's expected to get some sort of briefing there. Now, the New York Times had initially reported that he was going to be getting a briefing of top secret Chinese war plans, but the Pentagon, as well as President Trump, has denied that, saying it is completely untrue. But of course, we will be following that story, and we'll bring you a report very soon. We'll be right back.
84 million people travel through Heathrow Airport every year, the busiest airport in the UK, in Europe, one of the busiest, of course, in the world. This incident has been compared to the 2010 Icelandic volcano ash cloud that disrupted travel across Western Europe for weeks and weeks. This is Friday, meant to be the busiest day of the week. As you can see, the skies are clear above me. Anna.
We see the smoke still coming from that substation fire at this point. We don't know what caused the fire, but what does it mean that one substation can close down an entire airport?
That is an excellent question, and the one everyone is asking today. In the words of the Energy Secretary here, this is unprecedented. People were asleep last night, or about to go to sleep, when they heard this blast, saw these massive flames, and it quickly became clear what had happened. The fire brigade today saying that 25,000 liters of cooling oil were on fire at this electrical substation. Police say they do not believe foul play was involved, but counterterrorism police is now involved. Heathrow has just said that they need as much energy as a small city to operate. And so when things like this happen, they have enough energy to land aircraft, to evacuate passengers. They don't have enough to run this entire operation, which is why they took the decision to close down the airport today. Anna.
Danielle Hamamdin, thank you for that reporting. Next on Ana Cabrera reports, multiple scholars targeted for and gang members. Those are the people President Trump says he's targeting with his crackdown on immigration. But lately, another group appears to be added to that list: academics. In the last month, we've learned about several scholars targeted for deportation, despite having the appropriate papers to reside in the U.S. And they include a professor with a valid visa from Lebanon teaching at Brown University's medical school, a recent grad from Columbia University who is a pro-Palestinian activist with a green card and has a baby on the way, and a graduate student, also with a valid student visa from India, who has been teaching at Georgetown University. Let's go to NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez. And Gabe, you spoke to the attorney of Badar Khan Suri, the graduate student from Georgetown University I just mentioned. What more do we know about this individual and what happened?
Hi there, Anna. Good morning. Well, Suri's family says that he was arrested recently outside his home by masked agents who didn't immediately identify themselves. Now, as you said, he's a graduate student who also teaches at Georgetown University. He's a father of 3, and right now he is being held in custody in Louisiana as he was facing deportations. But late yesterday, a federal judge temporarily blocked that deportation. Now, I spoke with his attorney from the ACLU, and this also comes after the Department of Homeland Security says that he was spreading Hamas propaganda and promoting anti-Semitism. And one U.S. official told us that his father-in-law was at one point a Hamas advisor. Still, his attorney with the ACLU says this case has broader implications.
When an administration, when the president goes after people whom he disagrees with, whom he doesn't like, it really chills speech. It chills a core principle of American democracy, really. What's going on here is he's being targeted for his political speech. And that is something that cannot be tolerated in this country.
Now, for its part, Georgetown University says it was not aware of Suri engaging in any illegal activity, and he was granted a student visa to continue his doctoral research on it.
Gabe, this is now the second person who's been transferred out of state to Louisiana after being detained. Why Louisiana?
Yeah, well, ICE flies deportees out of several states, 4 states really across the country, including Florida, Arizona, Texas, and Louisiana. And the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, he has said that this is something that the administration plans to do, and they're using a law that grants the Secretary of State power to deport visa holders whose presence has adverse foreign policy consequences. So as for Louisiana, as we understand it, Suri was taken there, planned to be deported quickly. It's kind of a stage, one of ICE's staging areas where it does deportations. But again, that federal judge late yesterday temporarily blocking that deportation on it.
Gabe Gutierrez, thank you for joining us. Thanks for bringing us that latest case. In the meantime, a new warning from the top Democrat in the Senate facing questions about how far he's willing to push back against President Trump. Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said this about the president's attacks on the judiciary in a new interview with Meet the Press.
Is the United States in a constitutional crisis?
Yes, I do, Kristen, and democracy is at risk. Look, Donald Trump is a lawless, angry man. He thinks he should be king. He thinks he should do whatever he wants, regardless of the law. And he thinks judges should just listen to him.
Joining us now, New York University Law School professor on constitutional law, Kenji Yoshino. Good to see you, Professor. Constitutional crisis. Is that how you see it?
I wouldn't go that far quite yet, although I think the light is blinking, right? So I think that the constitutional crisis occurs when you have a direct order and then President Trump openly flouts it and says, I'm not going to follow that, period, full stop.
You don't think it's gotten to that point yet?
Well, I think with this Boasberg kind of fracas, like, it depends on your characterization, but he's not saying, like he said to Laura Ingraham, like, you know, I'm not going to flout a court order. So we have that kind of, at least facial kind of veneer of compliance with judicial.
Right. He's saying one thing, but there are indications his administration may be doing another.
Well, I think the most troubling thing for now is the call for impeachment of judges. Like, I just want to think about 3 tracks. Like, one track is you appeal the decision that you disagree with. The other one is you just totally ignore it, right? And I think right now he's putting a lot of his energy in between those 2 extremes by saying, impeach this judge. And that sounds like more lawful because it occurs within the confines of the Constitution, but nonetheless is extremely alarming because he's saying impeach this person not because they did anything wrong professionally, but rather because they rendered a decision with which I disagree.
And we actually saw that rare statement with the Chief Justice, John Roberts, pushing back on this calls to impeach the judge in the Alien Enemies Act. And he said, quote, "For more than 2 centuries, it has been established that impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision. The normal appellate review process exists for that purpose." I wonder, Kenji, does the Supreme Court have any role, any power to really protect the balance between the judiciary and the executive branches?
I think formally, no, right? The Supreme Court and the judiciary in general has been called the least dangerous branch in the Federalist Papers because it has neither the power of the sword nor the purse, right? So it's seen as weaker than the other 2 branches of government in that way, and it relies on, the public's kind of respect for its legitimacy. But in another sense, yes, I think what Chief Justice Roberts is doing in that very unusual statement, I think he's only done it twice before, is to rally the judiciary and the people around to support the judiciary in order to say, look, you cannot actually do this. The rule of law depends on the judges being the ultimate arbiter of the law.
In the meantime, you have the White House trying to use the Supreme Court to get their way, calling on the Supreme Court to rein in what they're calling its activist judges. Take a listen to Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt earlier this week.
The judges in this country are acting erroneously. We have judges who are acting as partisan activists from the bench. They are trying to dictate policy from the President of the United States. They are trying to clearly slow walk this administration's agenda, and it's unacceptable.
Can you shine light on what instances would make sense for a judge to be impeached, and would the Supreme Court have any role in that?
Yes, in fact, 18 judges have been impeached over the course of this nation's history, but they're fairly kind of clear cases, I think, to the American public. Like you take a bribe, or you engage in sexual harassment, or you're publicly drunk on the bench. So things that have nothing to do with the substance of decisions have been the grounds on which judges have been impeached in the past.
So great to have you here to help shine light on all of this. Thank you so much, Kenji Yoshino. Good to see you. Happy Friday. Up next on Ana Cabrera, for Democrats looking to chart a new path forward. What AOC and Bernie Sanders are telling the thousands coming to their rallies. Plus, the ripple effects of President Trump's order to dismantle the Department of Education. If American education is forced to reform, what's the answer? We'll ask an expert on the front lines.
Are a tax on hardworking Americans. These tariffs are going to cost more to Americans at the pump, and also when they go do their groceries. So we're launching an ad campaign today in 12 different states. Canadians are sending a message that there's no winners in a trade war. There will be job losses on both sides of the border, and particularly in the U.S. And Canada is the biggest customer of the U.S. We buy more American goods from the U.S. than China, Japan, France, and the U.K. So imagine what the Trump administration right now is doing to its biggest customer that is supporting so many American jobs. So that's why we want to make sure that Americans know.
So tell us more about this ad campaign that you're launching and what states in particular.
Mm-hmm. So we will be having huge billboards along the key highways in Florida, in Nevada, in Georgia, in New Hampshire, Michigan, Ohio, 12 different states. And we know very much that these states are red states. But we're doing that because we think that we need to send a message to the American people for them to understand what's at stake, because this is really going to hurt, their livelihoods and have an impact on their wallets. And my message to hardworking Americans is, please talk to your senators, talk to your House representatives, to your mayors, to your governors. Send a message that you don't want these tariffs, because nobody will win in this approach coming out from the White House. So it is important that all together we work to prevent them.
So the EU is now delaying its retaliatory tariffs it had announced to allow for, quote, additional time for discussions with the U.S. Is Canada willing to do the same with the retaliatory tariffs that your country has announced for April 2nd? That is a day, as we know, that the president is calling Liberation Day.
So what we said is that we would be ready to put $150 billion worth of tariffs against against the tariffs imposed by the White House. Because of a pause on one of the executive order coming out of the White House, we decided to pause the rest of the tariffs, the $90 billion worth of tariffs that are still under consultation here, just to show goodwill. I've had some conversations with Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State. I've been in contact also with key Republican senators, including Lindsey Graham. My colleagues within cabinet have been in contact also with Howard Lutnick and Mr. Bessent. And so our job is to make sure that while we put pressure, at the same time, we're really willing to discuss. But at the end of the day, we very know, Pam, that people watching us right now in the States are the only ones that can really influence what's going on in the White House, because ultimately they're the first victims of these taxes that are imposed by their federal government against them.
Do you think that President Trump is using these tariffs as a sort of economic force to annex Canada? He had said previously that he would be willing to use economic force against Canada to achieve his objective.
Yes, he has mentioned that. And so when President Trump speaks, we take him to his word. And so in that sense, Canadians are fighting back at home, right here in Canada where I am. People are buying local. People are there to support their own Canadians because people are mad. They're infuriated. Imagine the case of another country saying that they don't recognize the borders of the U.S., that they're threatening the sovereignty of American territory. How would Americans react? They would say, no way, it's unacceptable. Well, that's exactly how Canadians are reacting right now.
And I want to highlight something the president said this week. Take a listen.
Canada was meant to be the 51st state. One of the nastiest countries to deal with is Canada. The people that, now this was Trudeau, the people that good old Justin, I call him Governor Trudeau, his people were nasty.
What is your message to the president?
Well, my message first and foremost is to American people. We know that we're best friends. Americans and Canadians are best friends, best neighbors, best allies. We never started this trade war. We never called for it. And by the way, this was never discussed in the election that ultimately happened back in November in your country. So we'll continue to push back against that narrative. And meanwhile, well, the rhetoric coming out of the White House is so how can I say, absurd regarding the annexation and completely unacceptable. Well, we're looking at other partners. Canada has always been very close also to Europe, and we've been always very close to Great Britain. So we'll do that. But meanwhile, who are the first impacted by all this rhetoric and all these this nastiness? It's ultimately American people themselves. And so that's why it was important, Pam, for me to have the chance to talk to your viewers through our interview to make sure that the message was there and that Americans can send a clear message also to their lawmakers.
And just really quick, have these negotiations with Bessent and Lutnick and the White House, have they gotten anywhere? Is there anything that you can tell us about what may have changed as a result of these negotiations?
We were able to suspend a part of the 25% tariffs that were imposed on us linked to the apparently fentanyl crossing the Canadian border and going into the U.S., which we know at this point is a bogus argument. We've been working hard on protecting our border, on both working really hard also with the American administration. We think that there are too much American lives and Canadians' lives that are affected by fentanyl, the scourge of fentanyl. Some days per capita, there are more people dying of fentanyl in Canada and in the US. So we have to work together. That's why we put more boots on the ground at the border, more Black Hawk helicopters, more also work being done through a strike force between Canada and US to counter fentanyl. But at the end of the day, we saw that all the work we were doing in good faith was not necessarily having an impact on President Trump himself. So that's why we're keeping our countermeasures, our counter tariffs in place. And of course, we want to find a way to ultimately be able to deal with this issue.
All right, Foreign Minister Melanie Joly, thank you very much. Well, CNN Jordan Lieberman has breaking news from the Pentagon. Oren, what can you tell us?
Well, Elon Musk was in the building for just under about an hour and a half. He showed up at 9 o'clock this morning and left a short time ago at 10:21, meeting with Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. From what we saw and from what we had learned, the meeting was supposed to be in the tank, which is a room where classified meetings are held inside of the building. And there was quite a crowd inside or right outside of that building as we were there for this morning. But after that crowd had stood outside the tank for quite some time and the acting chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff had walked into that room, as had the Department of Defense's chief of staff, Elon Musk did not go into that room. Instead, he went upstairs to the defense secretary's office, and that is where he met for quite some time with Hegseth. Of course, this meeting comes with certain reports out there that Musk was to be briefed on the U.S. war plans for China, which are, of course, highly classified. There have also been some reports suggesting that he was getting an unclassified briefing on the threat from China. Well, we tried to clarify that when Musk left the building just a short time ago. When we asked how the meetings went, Musk responded, "It's always a great meeting. I've been here before, you know." That was as he and Hegseth laughed and walked towards the entrance of the building. Outside the Pentagon, Musk and Hegseth shook hands, and Musk told him, "If there's anything I can do to be helpful, I'd like to see you." Neither Musk nor Hegseth have made any comment or answered any questions on whether the briefing itself was about China. The White House, the Pentagon, and the administration have pushed back very hard on the idea that this was any sort of classified briefing or that he was being given sensitive intelligence while he was here. On his way out, Musk was asked by the New York Times what the two discussed, and Hegseth said, "Why would I tell you?" and then left.
And we should note that the Wall Street Journal effectively confirmed what the New York Times had reported, that the initial reason for this meeting was to have a top secret briefing about China and military readiness in the event of a war. Is there any indication, Oren, from your sources that that was maybe the original intent and then it changed once this was reported?
We're not clear on that at this point, whether the intention was always to have a classified or unclassified briefing, and if that at some point changed. So we simply don't have those definitively right now.
All right. Promises, and he's going to force Russia to the table, but it's not an easy situation. Russia was able to regroup and doing a lot of damage to Ukrainian people, but I think he will get to the table, and hopefully he'll be able to push Russia at least to have a temporary resolution in the brutal war.
Right. And you know, as you know, some would argue who've been studying this that Russia wants to be at the table because it gives it legitimacy, and a tactic that Russia has often used, Putin for his part has often used, is to use negotiations as a delay tactic to continue these attacks and continue his advantage. President Trump has said that he was optimistic about Monday's ceasefire talks. He also said, as you know, he would end the war on day one. It's now day 61. Do you think the president is clear-eyed about Vladimir Putin?
Listen, President Trump always tries to put pressure, and he sometimes do things, you know, to understand how serious it is. And he, you know, Putin understand that President Trump is very serious. It takes some time, but he will be patient for some time, and then he might become less patient. And Putin knows that. So I think, you know, Putin is trying to take advantage in the situation that unfortunately was created in the last 3 years, and was created with lack of proper help from the West and lack of proper preparation by President Zelensky. But at some point, he will understand that President Trump is serious. I mean, Russia got hurt too through this war. You're not in the position that they try to act, but ultimately, unfortunately, they're not losing the war to be able to push them to negotiation where could have happened several years ago.
I'm wondering, just as the fact that, again, you were born in Ukraine, you know, Russia, as you point out, has the advantage of this war. Russia has made it clear time and time again it has a maximalist view. It wants to essentially own Ukraine, your birth country. So, you know, at what point do you want to see President Trump step up and be harder on Russia? And, you know, because otherwise, what is Vladimir Putin's incentive to end this war?
Well, I think President Trump been actually hard on Russia, even during his last presidency, not just words, but with true actions. His actions are actually quite strong. He might do less words, but action, and that's what matters for Putin. But ultimately, you know, the result of this is going to be only achieved, and Ukraine can only win this war if they strengthen their country, if they elect good government, if they have strong military that's supported by government and strong national defense. If you want to win wars, you want to have peace, you need to be able to win the war. And unfortunately, Ukraine couldn't recover from post-Soviet Union time, from corruption and bad government. They keep electing new governments, and they get worse and worse, and Putin take advantage. So they will have election, and that's a choice that Ukrainian people will have to make if they want to ever be free and be able to free their country and stood up against Russia.
And certainly, you know, during the first Trump administration, it did impose a lot of sanctions on Russia. This time around, what actions do you think President Trump has taken specifically toward Russia that you would say are tough actions?
Well, he's going to do it, and he's meant, you know, if Putin doesn't get to the table, he will be serious about sanctions. Unfortunately, a lot of sanctions we didn't do that were painful for Russia, including Russian oil. That's what funded the war, because we had terrible policy on our domestic oil and energy policy that's allowed Russia to fund the war. President Trump can be very serious. We have an ability to increase production. We have an ability to work with our allies to significantly increase production if needed, and put serious sanctions on Russia so they will be suffocated with lack of money. Soviet Union was defeated not by weapons, but financial sanctions and also energy policies. And he can be serious about that. So President Trump can be patient for a little bit longer, but if Putin doesn't get seriously to the table, he can become much harsher.
When would you like to see that? How much grace are you going to give these negotiations until you think Trump should be harsher?
Well, listen, I think, you know, they're trying, you know, they have meetings again, and we'll see how they're going to do it. Seems like, you know, President Putin does keep giving promises to President Trump. So we'll see. He can be patient for some time, but as you know, President Trump is a serious negotiator, and at some point, if he sees that people are not serious, he's going to be much tougher, and I think Putin understands that.
I just want to quickly ask you, because this is news of day, Elon Musk just wrapped up his visit to the Pentagon. He received a briefing there. We don't know exactly what it was about. Of course, he's visiting as the Defense Department weighs major cuts. You know, Musk has lucrative contracts with the U.S. government. A federal judge ruled this week that he exceeded his authority for his Doge work. Musk, who isn't Senate confirmed, has all this power, and yet he's never testified before Congress. Would you like to see him testify about his work?
No, I actually would like him to see. Maybe he can brief him why Pentagon and Department of Defense couldn't be audited for years. Government accountability offices, you know, keep sending them alarming reports that is not auditable. Government auditors couldn't audit. So hopefully, you know, he will be able to help us. As a former auditor, I would love his help to actually audit the Pentagon, that we can use money wisely and make our Pentagon strong and national defense, that money go to proper causes. And we know
is ordering troops to seize more territory in Gaza if Hamas fails to release more hostages. Let's bring in CBS News foreign correspondent Remi Inocencio live in Tel Aviv once again. Remi, good morning to you. What else do we know about this new directive for IDF soldiers?
Errol, good morning. Yes, on top of seizing those additional areas in the strip that you mentioned, Israel Katz, the defense minister, has ordered troops to expand the security zones around Gaza. And he says that this is all about the hostages, and that the more Hamas continues its refusal to release them, then the more territory, he says, it will lose to Israel. And a reminder, it's believed 59 hostages, both alive and dead, are still held in Gaza. And this new order would apparently be building off of the IDF's initial operations that we reported earlier this week, focusing on central Gaza and southern Gaza. The IDF dropped leaflets telling people to evacuate certain areas, so those areas may also be expanded. And then there's, of course, the renewed loss of lives. Nearly 600 people killed in the past 4 days alone in that IDF bombing, and there likely will be more strikes, more death, really, as we've been saying, turning the clock back even more, as if that ceasefire over 2 months really hadn't happened.
Wow. And Remi, the Prime Minister there has fired the head of Shin Bet. Help us understand the significance of that.
Absolutely, yes. And actually, Israeli newspapers, this is what they're talking about today. This is unprecedented. It's the first time that the head of the country's internal intelligence services, some compare it to the FBI, has ever been fired. His name is Ronen Bar. And the cabinet fired him in what was a unanimous vote late last night. Now, Netanyahu said that he lost faith in him. His allies accuse him for the security failures of October 7th. They say that he actually got intel the night before October 7th, but then didn't act on it. But there's always a flip side, right, Errol? Bar, turns out, was leading a high-profile corruption probe into, guess who? Netanyahu, into influence from Qatar directly into his office. Critics of Netanyahu say he's just trying to save his own skin, firing the chief, and then trying to install someone who will be an ally. This case is now headed to the High Court.
Remy Inocencio, thank you.
And pleads with rescue teams to get her out. Emergency services in Beit Lahia in northern Gaza get to work. They eventually free her, but the extent of her injuries is unknown. It's been 3 days since Israel broke the months-long ceasefire and resumed its full-scale military operation in the Strip. The women and children of Gaza overwhelmingly continue to suffer the most under Israel's war.
We found this girl after we'd searched the entire building and recovered all the bodies. She was covered in a mountain of rubble. She's just 6 or 7 months old.
Israel's defense minister is warning the Palestinian population of complete destruction and devastation if Israeli captives are not returned and Hamas ousted. In Al-Aqsa Hospital in the central part of the Strip, an infant pulled from the rubble is watched over by his grandmother on what should have been a very special day.
Today is my grandson's birthday. Is this the gift he gets? He was hit in the head. We're not yet sure what the effect will be. He just turned 2 years old. When we call his name, he doesn't answer. What has he seen from the world?
In Khan Yunis in the south, Israel's expanding bombing campaign is further devastating many neighborhoods already in ruins. Mike Lappel, Aljazeera.
Of displaced Palestinians returned from southern part of the Gaza Strip to the north to find their homes completely destroyed. They have been forced to live in makeshift tents in the Shijaiya and Beit Hanun neighborhoods. And after the Israeli military issued new evacuation orders ordering civilians to head to the west, they are now living in makeshift tents and they are living in the same circle of displacement. And these flimsy tents do not offer any sort of protection from the harsh weather conditions. The weather is adding an extra element of suffering to these displaced Palestinians. We are here in Al Yarmouk Stadium, which was once a place holding athletic events, but now it has turned into a makeshift tent cities. We can clearly see here civilians in the cold weather trying to just wash their clothes and wash the pots and living in very harsh circumstances after the war returned on Tuesday. This is the third consecutive day of the war returning.
Sumy city towards the Russian border. There are new Ukrainian army defensive positions in the tree lines. Ukrainian jet fighters above. And the further north you go, the greater the destruction. Russian forces are pushing the Ukrainian army back towards the border a few kilometers away. The threat of drone strikes like this is increasing. And soldiers are doing all they can to protect their military vehicles and themselves if they are forced to retreat from a Russian pushback into the Sumy region.
What you can see there is protective netting that the Ukrainian military have put up as a means of trying to protect vehicles traveling through this village from drone strikes. There's a lot of houses that have been hit here in recent days by Russian drones, and most of the population of this village have left.
Those that remain say the situation has changed for the worse in recent weeks.
The difference now is that they're coming onto our side again, and it's become tough. Before, when our soldiers were pushing into Russia, it was easier.
The regional military administration says Russian reconnaissance and sabotage units reportedly like this have crossed into Sumy in recent days.
It is a very difficult situation. If there was a ceasefire, I don't think Russia would keep its promise. It never keeps its promises. Even though I'm actually from Russia myself, I'm shocked by what's happening.
From being on the offensive and pushing deep into Russian territory, Ukraine now prepares to defend its border again. Charles Stratford, Aljazeera, the Sumy region, Ukraine.
Israel's military has launched a full-scale ground invasion in Rafah as it relentlessly attacks the Gaza Strip for the fourth straight day since Israel unilaterally shattered the ceasefire with Hamas. Israeli troops are also pushing into the north near Beit Lahia and other areas. At least 200 Palestinian children have been killed in Israeli attacks since Tuesday. This is a mother in Khan Yunis whose daughter was killed in an Israeli strike.
Stop this war. Stop this extermination. This is an extermination of the entire Palestinian people. What is the fault of the children? These children, what is their fault? For every child, you bring 100. What is this? Shame on you. The entire square, not a stone or anything remains. It is all destroyed. They left nothing in the whole area.
UNRWA has announced 5 of its workers have been killed in recent days. This brings the total of all UNRWA workers killed in Israeli attacks on Gaza over the past 18 months to 284. President Trump Thursday signed an executive order to start dismantling the Department of Education.
My administration will take all lawful steps to shut down the department. We're going to shut it down and shut it down as quickly as possible. It's doing us no good. We want to return our students to the states.
The department cannot be fully shut down without an act of Congress, but Trump's order directs Education Secretary Linda McMahon to shutter regional officers, transfer out some of its key functions, further slash the department's workforce, which has already been cut in half since Trump took office. The fate of public education, funding, labor, civil rights protections, financial aid for students now hangs in the balance. Protests are planned for today in D.C. and beyond. We'll have more on Trump's executive order and its implications after headlines. A federal judge temporarily blocked Elon Musk and his Department of Government Efficiency, Doge, from accessing Social Security Administration databases containing personal information. Judge Ellen Hollander also ordered Doge to delete identifiable personal data it may have already obtained and to remove software installed on Social Security systems. In her opinion, the judge wrote, the Doge team is essentially engaged in a fishing expedition at SSA in search of a fraud epidemic based on little more than suspicion, she said. Federal Judge James Boasberg accused the Trump Justice Department of, quote, again evading their obligations and presenting woefully insufficient information around its deportation flights to Venezuelan immigrants under the Alien Enemies Act. Judge Boasberg had ordered the administration to present the information after it violated the judge's order last weekend to halt and turn around removal flights to El Salvador. Meanwhile, lawyers and loved ones of the deported individuals say they've been falsely accused of belonging to the Tren de Aragua gang simply because they have tattoos. One of them is professional soccer player Jersey Reyes-Barrios. His lawyer says the tattoo that landed him on the deportation list depicts a crown sitting on top of a soccer ball with a rosary and the word Dios, God, chosen by Barrios as a nod to the Real Madrid soccer team logo. In Venezuela, families of deportees have pleaded to authorities to bring their loved ones home in reports of serious abuses at El Salvador's mega supermax prison where they're being held.
We asked the corresponding authorities, the UN, to please join us. We want to know the whereabouts of our children. Please return them to us if they are in El Salvador. They are not criminals.
In more immigration news, the private for-profit company Geo Group has announced a new contract with Immigration and Customs Enforcement that'll see the reopening of a shuttered Michigan prison to start detaining immigrants and asylum seekers. The North Lake facility in Baldwin would become one of the largest ICE jails in the country with a capacity of at least 1,800 people. North Lake closed in 2022 as part of President Biden's executive order to end the use of private prisons by federal government. Detention Watch Network said in a statement, quote, "The perverse financial incentives are glaring as Geo Group stands to generate an excess of $70 million in annualized revenue from North Lake at the expense of people's lives," unquote. Geo Group's stock value has soared since Trump returned to office. This comes as the National Labor Relations Board has dropped a case accusing Geo Group of retaliating against immigrant detainees who protested over low pay and dangerous working conditions. Detainees are paid as little as $1 a day for their labor. President Trump rescinded an executive order targeting the law firm Paul, Weiss, Rifkin, Wharton, and Garrison after meeting in person with its chair this week. Under the deal, the law firm will provide $40 million in free legal services supporting Trump's agenda, including his task force to combat anti-Semitism. Last week, Trump's order threatened to revoke the firm's security clearances and end its federal contracts over its association with former partner Mark Pomerantz, who oversaw the Manhattan District Attorney's probe into Trump's finances. The news has set off alarm in the legal profession. The firm is associated with Democratic causes and is known for fighting civil rights cases against the government. The White House denied reports Elon Musk will be briefed on potential war plans with China when he visits the Pentagon today. The meeting represents a significant expansion of Musk's access to sensitive government information and underscores his many conflicts of interest. His companies, including SpaceX and Tesla, have received billions of dollars in government contracts, including with the Pentagon, and Musk has major financial interests in China. Rwanda-backed M23 fighters have seized another key town in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. The rebel group entered the mining hub of Walikale on Wednesday. M23's latest advance comes after Congolese President Félix Tshisekedi and Rwandan President Paul Kagame called for an immediate ceasefire in the eastern DRC, following peace talks in Doha mediated by Qatar. But M23 leaders are not backing down.
They have put prices on our arrest. We have nothing more to lose. We will fight until our cause is heard. Meanwhile, what happened in Doha, as long as we don't know the details and as long as it doesn't solve our problems, we will say it does not concern us.
In Sudan, military forces have recaptured the presidential palace in Khartoum, a major victory for the Sudanese army after nearly 2 years of war against the Rapid Support Forces. Over 28,000 people have been killed since the conflict began in April 2023, with millions forcibly displaced from their homes in what the UN has described as the world's largest humanitarian crisis. In Turkey, mass protests continue over the arrest of Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu, a major rival to Turkey's authoritarian President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Turkish authorities have detained at least 37 people over social media posts in support of İmamoğlu, who was taken into custody Wednesday on what his backers say are trumped-up charges ahead of primary elections on Sunday. Protesters took to the streets of Istanbul.
Bugün Türkiye demokrasisine bir darbe yapıldı, sivil darbe.
This is a coup to the national will and democracy. When viewed from foreign countries today, Turkey is seen as having an appearance where democracy is over, justice is over, and everyone who is not with the government is in prison. Do you actually know what this is like? It is proof that now the one-man regime is saying that there are no elections in Turkey. I am king. There will be no elections.
At least 6 people have been killed, another 40 still missing after a rubber dinghy carrying refugees capsized Tuesday in the Mediterranean off the Italian island of Lampedusa. Only 10 survivors have been rescued. The boat departed from Sfax, Tunisia, and the passengers were from Cameroon, Ivory Coast, Guinea, and Mali. At least 270 refugees have already died this year trying to cross the Mediterranean to seek safety in Europe. Over 30 UCLA students who were brutalized last spring during Gaza solidarity protests have sued campus officials and law enforcement agencies. Students had set up peaceful campus encampment demanding an end to UCLA's financial ties with Israel's war, but they were repeatedly targeted for abuse, including from outside groups, culminating in what they call a brutal mob assault on April 30th. The live-streamed attacks on students and faculty were carried out for at least 4 hours, while UCLA security stood by. The university called in police the following day to forcefully and violently remove the protesters. The plaintiffs describe enduring physical and psychological harm. This is Benjamin Morisef, an Israeli-American undergraduate plaintiff who accused UCLA of anti-Semitism over its silencing of Jewish anti-genocide voices on campus.
This lawsuit asks for the barest of respect towards the right to free expression, the right to voice our righteous opposition to the ever-present reality of imminent death every Palestinian child faces so long as the Israeli military continues its aggression. I ask the university not to collaborate with the oppressive forces of our time, unless they wish to be remembered like the heartless administration that arrested the Vietnam War protesters. Choose now to stand on the side of justice.
Meanwhile, at Cornell University here in New York State, outspoken international student activist Mamadou Tall has filed a lawsuit along with 2 others seeking to block Trump's executive orders targeting Palestinian rights activists. The 3 Cornell plaintiffs argue they've been unconstitutionally silenced. Last year, Mamadou Tall, a British and Ghanaian national, was twice suspended for his activism by Cornell, which moved to cancel a student visa, but ultimately backed down. Tall says law enforcement agents started following him around after he filed his lawsuit earlier this week. Supporters at Cornell mobilized Thursday to demand hands off Mamadou. Last month, Tal told Democracy Now! Why he would never stop advocating for Palestinian rights.
When we say Palestine is a litmus test, we're saying that it is not that we privilege the Palestinian cause over every other cause, but rather Palestine holds a mirror up into the world and says, what kind of world do we want to live in?
To see our full interview with Mamadou Tall, go to democracynow.org. On Thursday, organizers say more than 1,000 Jewish activists from groups including If Not Now and Jews for Racial and Economic Justice rallied in front of the Manhattan headquarters of ICE to demand the release of Columbia student activist Mahmoud Khalil, who was picked up by federal immigration agents March 8th and remains in a Louisiana detention center. We'll have the latest on Mahmoud Khalil's case later in the broadcast. 2 House Democrats have openly called for Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer to be replaced amid mounting anger over his vote backing the GOP government spending package. Congress members Glenn Ivey and Delia Ramirez made the comments during recent town halls. Senator Schumer was forced to postpone his book tour amidst widespread voter backlash and planned protests. Meanwhile, the Democratic National Committee announced it's going to host town halls in Republican-held House districts around the country. And in related news, Congressmember Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has joined Senator Bernie Sanders as he continues his Fighting Oligarchy tour, addressing packed crowds and overflow rooms in Republican and swing districts across the United States. The pair addressed 5,000 people in Tempe, Arizona on Thursday.
We're not going to allow you and your friend, Mr. Musk, and the other billionaires to wreak havoc on the working families of this country. No, you're not going to destroy Social Security. You're not going to destroy Medicaid. You're not going to destroy the Veterans Administration.
Bernie Sanders has been visiting areas where the district's own congressional representatives have neglected to meet with constituents. House Speaker Mike Johnson has urged fellow Republicans to avoid town hall meetings after confrontations with concerned voters. And those are some of the headlines. This is
Big dreams to revolutionize the motor industry. Today, it's grown into the world's biggest producer of electric vehicles
and a leader in sustainable technology. CEO Elon Musk has been at the heart of Tesla's success, but he's also been a controversial figure, and some of his recent actions are now raising questions about the company's future. With me in the studio is Theo Leggett, our international business correspondent. Theo, we've seen so much on Tesla, who is buying it, who is perhaps not buying it, who's selling their cars if they've got them. Politics and business have collided, haven't they?
They have, and that's largely because of the role currently being played in the US government by Elon Musk. If you step back a bit, what Tesla has achieved in little more than 2 decades is truly remarkable. It was just a handful of people with, as you said in your cue, big dreams. They wanted to produce electric cars and revolutionise the motor industry. Arguably, they've done quite a lot of that. They took electric cars from being seen as pretty uninspiring, mundane, short-range things that you wouldn't want to have on your drive, to being exciting and fun, putting them in the mainstream. I mean, I remember when I first drove a Tesla Model S back in 2012 or 2013, it blew me away because it was completely different from anything we'd seen before. So Tesla has grown massively, and Elon Musk has been a big part of that. He's been the absolute central figurehead of this company, and he has a very loyal following. But what we've been seeing since 2022, when he took over Twitter, now known as X, and much more in recent weeks as he's first of all been part of the Trump election campaign and then one of President Trump's closest acolytes in charge of the government's Department of Efficiency, is that he's become a polarising figure. He's been promulgating his views on X. He's been standing up for a government that wants to go out and dismiss lots of federal government employees. Some people like that, some people don't. But it's made him into a polarising figure. And the question is really whether that's been affecting Tesla's business.
And what is the business doing now?
Well, Tesla, in some ways, it's in very good health. You know, the Model Y was the biggest selling car worldwide last year. But for the first time in more than a decade last year, we saw Tesla's sales fall. Now, it wasn't a big fall. It was nothing to panic about. But this is a growth-focused company. Its valuation depends on it growing fast. So it was a bit of an alarm bell ringing there. And then at the start of this year, in some markets, particularly in Europe, we saw big falls in sales. Not, I should say, the UK. That's an outlier. Sales here rose 21%. But across Europe, it was down 45% in January, and we've seen other big falls in February. And there is some evidence that Tesla's brand is being hit by what Elon Musk is doing, how he's speaking in public. Things like, for example, appearing in a video at a rally of Alternative für Deutschland during the German election campaign. That's a far-right group. Some people did not like that. So there is some evidence that people who might previously have bought Teslas are moving away from the brand. But that is not the sole reason why Tesla's sales have been struggling.
What are the other reasons? Because I was going to say, you know, are customers still slightly separating in their heads the allure of what is still a very elite brand, Tesla, and those who are committed to doing something more environmentally friendly when they're driving, to Elon Musk's politics? Because that's a big question, isn't it?
Well, some people are clearly able to separate those two things and have no problem with it. You know, people are still buying Teslas. But if you look at the wider market, there are other factors being involved. So, for example, some of Tesla's model range, which was once groundbreaking, now looks a little bit dated. The Model S has been on the market for an awful long time, so has the Model X. The Model Y has just had a refresh, but, you know, there are mixed opinions about how good that is. Some people may, incidentally, have been holding off buying cars because they knew this refreshed model was coming up. But if there's an awful lot of competition on the market now. If you look at what established car makers are doing, they've been spending tens of billions of dollars on making their own exciting electric cars. And then in China, you have a whole array of new brands. Think of XPeng, think of NIO, think in particular of BYD, that are moving out into the international market and potentially taking market share from Tesla. So there's a lot going on. The market is changing, and Tesla's no longer seen as the way out in front innovator that it used to be. And then when you look at the leadership of the company, irrespective of his politics, Elon Musk has a lot on his plate right now. He's leading Tesla, yes, but also X, also XAI, the AI company, and also SpaceX. There's an awful lot he's doing, and now he's in Doge, the Department of Government Efficiency, as well. He said in an interview the other day, in answer to a question, how are you juggling all of this? He said, with great difficulty. So there are some concerns that maybe he's got too much on in order to focus solely on Tesla, and that Tesla maybe could do with new leadership that was more devoted to the company itself.
It's a fascinating story, Theo Leggett. Thanks very much. I know you've written for...
Showing up to what eventually became dueling protests.
Stand up!
Their rallying cry, a driving force outside this Tesla dealership in Lisle, where hundreds Tuesday night joined DuPage County Democrats and other groups calling out Tesla's CEO Elon Musk and President Trump for their ongoing efforts to slash government spending. Over the past few weeks, Musk and his Department of Government Efficiency have fired hundreds of government employees and shuttered some federal agencies in the name of rooting out alleged waste, fraud, and abuse.
It's not American, and people are in the streets to protest what Donald Trump and Elon Musk are doing to our country.
While outnumbered, local Republicans who showed up to counter-protest remained unmoved in their support of Doge.
Here's Elon Musk working for literally nothing, giving up literally billions of dollars for his activism and his patriotism.
In a statement to ABC 7, DuPage County GOP Chairman Kevin Coyne said, in part, quote, "It is ridiculous that the DuPage Democrats are harassing and intimidating a local business that has contributed significantly to the village of Lisle's economy."
Las Vegas. This dramatic video showing multiple cars in flames. According to authorities, the suspected arson occurred early this morning. When police arrived, they found 5 vehicles set on fire or damaged, and the word resist spray painted on the front of the business.
We believe the suspect approached the business wearing all black clothing, and he used what appear to be Molotov cocktails and a firearm to conduct his attack.
Just hours before in Kansas City, 2 Tesla Cybertrucks set ablaze at a dealership there. Tonight, the FBI stepping in to help local police investigate both incidents.
It gave these back-to-back gestures that people are saying mimicked a Nazi salute. You see it there. Elon Musk has not directly addressed this, but he has appeared to edit out that gesture from the video that he posted on X, the platform he, of course, owns. Help us understand what transpired. Thank you.
Oh, careful. Careful with that salute.
It wasn't even like a subtle, like a wave, like one of these, like a...
It's okay, it's good to be proud of German culture, German values, and not to lose that in some sort of multiculturalism that dilutes everything.
That's what a Nazi would say.
We don't want Italy as a culture to disappear. We don't want France as a culture to disappear. I think we have to have maintain the sort of reasonable cultural identity of the various cultures.
China für sie auch Nazi. Nazis, Nazis, Nazis, lauter Nazi.
USA, USA, USA, USA, USA. Quad! Yes.
No, Dog. No, this is the Charlie Chaplin mustache.